something that is not being reported in the US press, but is getting quite wide coverage in England and in Europe. And that is that the result of our backing the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan this year is to restore a heroin flow which would otherwise have been halved or more in the world, because the Taliban not only announced that they were going to outlaw planting, but their decree works. There was no Taliban opium planted last year, and that meant a reduction of 90% in the amount of opium coming out of Afghanistan, and the 10% that was left represented a radical increase in the areas under Northern Alliance control. Now, if we had not gone into Afghanistan, this would have been the most effective reduction in the flow of heroin in the world since the DEA was created 30 years ago. But by going into Afghanistan, backing the Northern Alliance, we've now chased the Taliban out, and in all kinds of provinces where the farmers have started to plant wheat, they're now plowing up their fields and putting in opium instead. And the global drug authorities at the UN expect that we're going to go back to the record flow of opium that we've seen in the last couple of years.
But we heard right after the attacks on September 11th, Tony Blair saying, "We will bomb the poppy fields." Well, there are no poppy fields. They destroyed their crops. I was in Moscow, Russia in March of this year, and I found out that Uzbekistan, and we're going to get to Uzbekistan in a minute, was awash in a sea of poppies. And what did I find also was that companies like Southern Air Transport, Evergreen, and other CIA-connected affiliates had been flying into and out of Tashkent. The CIA had been setting up operations. There were proprietary companies all over the place in Uzbekistan. So now we have the destruction of an opium crop, which does what? It takes cash out of the world's banking system. In conjunction with a stock market bubble, in conjunction with world oil prices or world oil production diminishing, and a huge bubble on Wall Street. Now we come to, this is just from recently, of course. This is from the October 5th. Afghan rebels, that's the Northern Alliance, our good friends. The Northern Alliance, who actually dominate the opium trade from the north of Afghanistan. Okay, now we've seen the recent stories saying that the poppy farmers are absolutely rejoicing because they've gone back to planting. So now we come back to the oil and drugs. There's an old saying, God equals gold, oil, and drugs. Testimony from February 12, 1998 in Washington, D.C. before the House International Relations Committee by John Maresca, Vice President of International Relations for UNICAL, which had been planning to build a pipeline for some time from the Central Asian oil fields of Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, all the stands, across Afghanistan down to the Pakistani coast. It's a distance of about 1,500 miles. To a terminal where U.S. tankers would take the oil and gas and ship it to China and Japan, the largest emerging markets in the world. China's in the middle of a huge oil crisis, and the U.S. Wall Street is pouring money into China hand over fist. And he says in this, construction cannot begin construction until an internationally recognized Afghanistani government is in place. A recent study for the World Bank states that the proposed pipeline for Central Asia across Afghanistan and Pakistan to the Arabian Sea would provide more favorable netbacks, that's money in your pocket, folks, to oil producers. That's his testimony. Now, UNICAL put the pipeline on hold in 1999. They also hired a guy named Henry Kissinger to consult for them, which explains why Afghanistan has never been listed as a sponsoring terrorist nation. Isn't that strange? The head of all the terrorists in the world, and the biggest country, has never been listed. Okay, U.S. companies to invest in Pakistan oil and gas sectors. This is from a Pakistani newspaper, the Frontier Post. The date is, what is the date? October 10th. And what this says, now October the 10th is after we've gone to war, after the attacks on World Trade Center, after we know, is anybody surprised at how quickly we kind of won in Afghanistan? Okay. Well, the war's been planned for 4 years, and I'm saving the best for last, but the U.S. ambassador to Pakistan met with the Pakistani oil minister and briefed the ambassador on the proposed Turkmenistan-Afghanistan Pakistan gas pipeline, and said that this project opens up new avenues of multidimensional regional cooperation, particularly in view of the recent geopolitical developments in the region. Gee, the pipeline that was blocked is now back on full tilt just days after we started the bombing. Suspicious. Okay, maybe I haven't convinced you of everything, but we're just getting warmed up now. This is how Afghanistan went unlisted as a terrorist sponsor. This is the story that I found, and it says right here, Unical hired former State Department insiders, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, former Special U.S. Ambassador John. The guy was also, I didn't see that. The Unical guy was also a special ambassador. And Robert Oakley, a former U.S. ambassador to Pakistan. You're going to love where Henry Kissinger turns up on this, by the way. All right. This is one other thing about Kissinger. Chinese oil firm picks Kissinger as advisor. This is from November 4th. Thank you. The Chinese National Offshore Oil Company has hired Henry Kissinger to head its foreign advisory board. Now, Kissinger's got the Pakistan end and he's got the China end of this oil pipeline. Who does Henry Kissinger front for?
Rockefeller.
Very good. David Rockefeller. Who's that? Zbigniew Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski was counselor for strategic and international studies, professor of American foreign policy at Johns Hopkins, national security advisor to President Jimmy Carter, trustee and founder of the Trilateral Commission, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, international advisor to several major corporations, associate of Henry Kissinger, also worked for Ronald Reagan in intelligence capacities. Co-chairman of the Bush National Security Advisory Task Force in 1988. What a guy. Z-Big. Now, if you want to get really, 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 really angry, go buy this book. It's called The Grand Chessboard. American Primacy and Its Geostrategic Objectives. Written by Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997. I'm going to read you some quotes from that book. Page XII, it's the very first words in the book. The last decades of the 20th century has witnessed a tectonic shift in world affairs. For the first time ever, a non-Eurasian power has emerged not only as a key arbiter of Eurasian power relations, but also as the world's paramount power. The defeat and collapse of the Soviet Union was the final step in the rapid ascendance of a Western Hemisphere power, the United States as the sole and indeed the first truly global superpower. Page XII, it's in the preface. But in the meantime, he says, it is imperative that no Eurasian challenger, Eurasia is everything in between roughly east of Germany all the way to the Pacific Ocean, south through the Indian subcontinent, includes the Middle East. It's imperative that no Eurasian challenger, by that he means Russia or China,